Hi class, in this recording we're going to focus on nerve regeneration, how we can heal after we have some kind of damage to our axons. So as we look at nerve regeneration, it's typically going to occur in peripheral nerve fibers. We don't have a lot of nerve regeneration within the central nervous system. Unfortunately, the central nervous system is a wee bit too complicated for that to happen. As we're looking at nerve regeneration, it all depends on the neurosoma, the cell body of the neuron. And if that neurosoma is intact, we are going to be able to regenerate the nerve fiber. We also are going to need a little bit of the neurolemma remaining. The neurolemma is the outer layer of the Schwann cells. So if we have some kind of damage, let's say we slice the nerve fiber, the downstream axon or nerve fiber from that injury point is going to generate. And then what we find is that the axon itself, the neurosoma itself will swell up. There's going to be debris downstream, and that debris is going to be cleaned up by macrophages, the macro meaning big phage to eat the big eater cells that will phagocytize the downstream axon. After that neurosoma swells, the endoplasmic reticulum is going to break up and the nucleus is going to move off center. And by having that nucleus move off center, we're going to be better able to coordinate and send materials down the neuron. This is also going to be notably due to the loss of nerve growth factors from the target neuron cell. So these cells, in this case, muscle fibers, send neuron growth factors, NGFs, to the target cell, and those neuron growth factors are needed for the neuron to function appropriately. As we're looking at the muscle fibers, when the muscle fibers lose innervation, there's going to be slight atrophy of the muscle fibers, or the cell that depends on that action potential is going to have some malfunctions associated with not getting the electrical signals they need. The axon, where it was cut, is going to sprout multiple growth processes. Some of those growth processes are going to go off in the wrong direction. Some of those growth processes, though, will correctly move through the regeneration tube that's formed by the Schwann cells. And as those Schwann cells and the neurolemma and basal lamina all work together to form that regeneration tube, it allows for the axon or nerve fiber to eventually get back to the target cell. Once that axon gets back to the target cell, once we have contact reestablished, the nucleus is going to return to its normal shape. It will move back to the center of the cell, and those atrophied muscle fibers are going to regrow. They become much thicker as they receive the appropriate innervation that they need. We do need to emphasize that regeneration is not fast. Regeneration is not perfect, and regeneration is not always possible. It could take up to 2 years for some regeneration to occur. I know for me personally, I had a couple knee surgeries when I was in high school, and around the incision point, I had a lot of localized numbness in my skin, and it took a couple of years for me to have sensation return to my knees. Sometimes the nerve fibers that are growing connect to the wrong muscle fibers, so we don't have the appropriate function. We have to rewire our brain. Sometimes they die, and within the central nervous system, regenerated nerve fibers have a very hard time forming the correct connections. Just because there's so many connections and so many neurons in such a small period of space. And because those nerve fibers are having a hard time forming the correct connections, they oftentimes just don't. And what we find, if we look at like spinal cord injuries or injuries to the brain itself, there's not the kind of nerve regeneration that we would really hope for at this point. I had mentioned nerve growth factor 2 slides ago. Let's talk about that in more detail. NGF, nerve growth factor, is secreted by target cells, glands, muscles, proteins, and it's going to be picked up by the axon terminals of neurons, the end of nerve fibers. And what does nerve growth factor do? It prevents apoptosis in growing neurons. So that nerve growth factor is very important for the functioning of our neurons. If we have neurons that aren't connecting to anything, that aren't doing anything, those neurons will oftentimes self-destruct because they are not needed. Nerve growth factor also is going to attract growing axons, and it allows neurons to make contact with target cells. If those neurons cannot make contact with their target cells, eventually the lack of nerve growth factor will induce apoptosis within that neuron. That's all we have for this recording on axon regeneration or nerve fiber regeneration. If you have any questions, please feel free to post in the class discussion board, shoot me an email, or ask a friend. And as always, happy studies.